we now have an opportunity to hear some reflections from Archbishop Malcolm about the Synod.
So having heard the huge response to the invitation to take part in the listening across the diocese, what are your thoughts today?
Well, my first thought when I heard that 21,000 people have responded, I didn't believe it, really. To be honest with you, I just thought that's half of the people who go to church on any given Sunday in our archdiocese. But of course, the listening includes a wider pool than just churchgoers. So that was people in our schools and other institutions and bodies which we incorporate, into our great family of the archdiocese. So it's still, nevertheless, hard to believe that we've had this tremendous response. So that's my first reaction, is I'm really buoyed up and encouraged by that. Yeah. So what's my reaction to what I've heard today? Well, it's a lot of it, I suppose, I could have said. I could have written the script, but on reflection, I don't think that's true at all, because although the Working Party has got the themes, the 4 themes out of this massive consultation, there's a lot going on under the surface here, which I think will emerge as the process continues. So that's part of my reaction so far. Yeah.
Archbishop Malcolm, you recently went to Rome. You've been twice in the last 2 weeks, but the first time you went was to share with a group of newly ordained bishops something about our synod journey. Will you tell us a little bit about that experience and how you were received?
I went for the afternoon. I've never done that before, but I was busy on either side of the day I was asked to speak. I didn't want to refuse. That was the first thing, because partly because I was very surprised they asked me in the first place to do it. This is the new Bishops' Boot Camp. It happens every year. I was on the first one in 2001. And it's a good experience. And there were about 100 new bishops there from around the world. And they were, through the weeks of talks and visits and little pilgrimages they do in that week, there was a thread of the church as on a synodal path running through the whole of the week. And the theme I was asked to talk about was how we put this into practice with the priests in the diocese. How does a new bishop work with the priests in a synodal manner, really? And we say synodal rather than synodical, because synodical is a word which is used by some of our fellow Christians. They have synodical government, and that involves lots of it's really a bit like Parliament, where you have different houses and they all vote and so on. We don't do that. We don't do that kind of democracy in the Catholic Church. And I think we're probably better off for not doing it, to be honest. But the Holy Father is very, very keen on understanding that the faithful, that he doesn't just use the word people of God. For him, that's not enough. He always says the holy, faithful people of God. Holy people, full of faith, they're the people of God. That's what's very important to him, because that then means, to follow someone like Cardinal Newman, then what we hear from the people, we being the hierarchy, hear from the people is a sense of the faith. So that is not, and that is to be listened to. That is something that's very, very important in the church. So for Pope Francis, who comes from Latin America, a very devotional form of Catholicism, lots of statues, processions, and so on. For him, it speaks of a deep faith and holiness based, on love of the gospel and love of Jesus Christ. And he wants to hear that as well as the theologians. And that's a very important point, I think, for us to understand. So what he's saying, so what I was trying to say to the priests during this talk I gave and the discussion following it was that the priests and bishops, we have to, remember that we're co-workers. We work together. We don't, and that the principle of leadership is the one that comes through the gospel that Jesus said to his disciples, that the lords of the Gentiles, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over their subjects, but not so you. And so the mode of leadership that is appropriate to the church is that of service. That's how we lead, servant king and so on with the hymn, all that. So that's fundamental. And it's on that basis then that we priests and bishops work together. And so I spoke about how we listen, well, first of all through prayer, like we're using the model we've used in our archdiocese. So it's so important for priests and bishops to pray together. And that means listening to God, and I spoke a lot about that. Then how we discern together what we hear. So we don't bombard God with petitions and questions and so on, but we must always start anything we do in silence. I don't know if you saw Archbishop Paul last night on television, Paul Gallagher in the Vatican. Yeah. And he said that, silence was such an important part of his daily prayer, because it's in silence that you hear God. And that was the point I was trying to make as well. Then we spoke about how we discern things, how things change, your ideas change when you put them under the gaze of God, and how we can do this together, and then how we can move forward along the path together. But we don't really know where we're going. That's very important to remember. Abraham didn't know where he was going when God asked him to move, but he knew he was going in the right direction. It's an important thing, particularly when your sat-nav fails. But it's also important for us spiritually. We can't approach any synodal process with foregone conclusions. We have to be open to the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives.
Can I ask you, because some of the things that we've listened to, some of the reports that we've all heard today, some of the things that we can do as a diocese, but there are other things that are outside the remit of our synod, outside what you can do. So you've heard those. So what's going to happen to those things and to the whole of our synod journey?
Well, there will be things that we can't do ourselves, obviously, because we are part of a universal church, and we don't make little decisions on our own or big decisions on our own, and without walking in step with the rest of the church. So that's an important principle. But some things will always come back. Now some problems, some questions, things that we can't respond to will always come back. The ordination of women, and interestingly enough, on that particular issue at the ad limina visit, that's when all the bishops of England and Wales go to Rome, we talked about this, and we talked about ecumenism as well, because we see in the Church of England, and I had this discussion with Cardinal Ouellet, who is in charge of the Congregation for Bishops, and that's one of the most important ministry, departments in the church. And it was a very interesting discussion, because he didn't just say, oh no, we can't talk about that, that's not going to happen. But in view of the fact that our fellow Christians have women priests and ministers, and we are engaged with them ecumenically, the question is always there for us. And so we talked a lot about different things, and theologically we tried to, just half an hour was all we had for the meeting, or an hour or something, but we did touch on a few very interesting points. The difference between priesthood and ministry, for example, priesthood within ministry, how are they different? because we know very well that women are very good ministers of the gospel. We see it all around us. So what's the distinction between ministry and priesthood? Now, I think that's a fundamental question. Now, we were able to talk about that now in Rome. Now, 10 years ago, well, I did my first ad limina visit in 2003, so that's 16 years ago. And when somebody mentioned in another meeting with another cardinal a similar issue, he stood up and started banging the table, you know. So, I mean, things have changed. So I'm not saying that there's going to be any change. I can't predict that any more than anyone else can. St. John Paul II has said that, as far as he's concerned, the matter's closed, but it can be approached from a different angle. And I think one way we can perhaps examine this issue further would be the theological distinction I was trying to make. So I don't think that we would have the door slammed in our face if I went to Rome and said, look, I want to talk to you about possibility of more married priests or of women's ordination, because the people are asking for this. They're saying, why aren't we considering it? And I'm sure that we would be listened to, and we would be given a fair hearing, I think. Yeah. But don't hold your breath. Yeah.
Archbishop Malcolm, I think our time's run out. So
sorry. If I
no,
talk too
fine.
much
No,
as usual,
fine.
I don't know.
Thank you very much for sharing that, and for the encouragement that you give us on this journey.
Well, I think it's a great journey, isn't it? And we're seeing how good it is today. So we have to hang in there. We've got to be like Abraham, you see. We don't know where we're going, but we're going in the right direction. Remember that. Thank you.